It was a rainy Sunday afternoon in Ashton, Ohio, a small town where everyone knew each other's name, and secrets had a way of finding the light. The kind of place where time seemed to stand still, even as the world beyond its quiet streets moved on relentlessly. At the local laundromat, the rhythmic hum of washers and dryers filled the air, blending with the faint scent of detergent and wet clothes. The small, dusty shop had seen its fair share of routine, but this afternoon would not be like any other. Sophia Martin, a college senior, stood in front of an overloaded washing machine, her hands trembling as she desperately tried to unjam a mess of tangled sheets. Frustration bubbled within her as she glanced at the clock, another half hour until she had to meet her friends for dinner. The more she tugged, the more tightly the sheets seemed to knot themselves, until she was completely trapped by the machine's refusal to cooperate. Her eyes scanned the laundromat in exasperation, but it was no use. She was alone. That's when he appeared. Adam Martin, fresh out of college and starting his first job at a local tech startup, was passing through on his way to the nearby cafe. His shoes squeaked on the tile floor as he entered, distracted by his phone. He looked up just in time to see Sophia, a tangle of frustration and helplessness. Without thinking, he walked over, offering a quiet but warm smile. "Need a hand?" Sophia blinked at him, startled for a moment by the stranger's sudden presence. I can't get this stupid machine to work," she said, her voice tinged with embarrassment. "I'm going to be late, and it's just stuck." Adam chuckled softly, the sound genuine and easy. "Let me see." He didn't wait for permission, slipping his hands around the drum with ease, quickly untangling the sheets. Sophia watched, still flustered, unsure of why she felt a strange flutter in her chest. As he worked, their eyes met, and something in the air shifted. It was subtle, the kind of connection you couldn't put into words. Sophia felt a pang of awareness. She wasn't sure if it was his kind smile or the way he carried himself, confident but not overbearing, but it was undeniable. She felt seen. His hands moved effortlessly, and in a matter of moments, the sheets were free. "There we go," Adam said with a satisfied smile, stepping back and wiping his hands on his jeans. "Problem solved." Sophia opened her mouth to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. She wasn't just thankful for his help, there was something else in the way he looked at her, a quiet intensity that she couldn't quite understand. She flushed, suddenly self-conscious. "Thanks," she managed, the heat in her cheeks betraying the sudden rush of emotions. "I don't know what I would have done." "No problem," he replied, his voice warm and reassuring. He didn't seem to mind her awkwardness. Instead, there was an ease about him that put her at ease too. "I'm Adam, by the way." "Sophia," she said, giving him a nervous smile. Their conversation lingered for a moment, small talk about the weather, the town, and the annoyances of laundromats. But as they spoke, Sophia felt something deepening in the silence between their words. It was strange, they'd only just met, and yet it felt like they'd known each other forever. The doorbell above the laundromat's entrance rang as another customer walked in, breaking the moment. Adam glanced at the time, and Sophia's heart sank a little. She had an appointment to keep. "I should go," she said reluctantly, trying to hide the disappointment in her voice. Adam smiled, a slight sadness in his eyes. "Maybe I'll see you around, Sophia." She nodded, unable to find the words, and as he turned to leave, she watched him go, the feeling of something unfinished lingering in the air. As she collected her things, she couldn't shake the strange sensation that something had shifted. That day, the world seemed to grow a little smaller, a little quieter, and Sophia wondered if this was the start of something unexpected. In the weeks that followed, their paths crossed again, first at a coffee shop, then at the park. The meetings, though accidental at first, grew into something more. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was something deeper, a quiet understanding, the kind that grows slowly. They started spending more time together, talking about their hopes and dreams, their lives beyond their mundane routines. Sophia was drawn to Adam's calm strength, his quiet way of thinking. And Adam, though he was reserved by nature, found something captivating about Sophia's boundless enthusiasm, her passion for teaching, and her determination to build a life. There was a light in her that he couldn't ignore, a spark of optimism that seemed to defy the challenges she faced. By the time summer rolled around, they were inseparable. It wasn't long before Adam asked her to be his girlfriend, and the day she said yes, he could see the future unfolding before him, a future he hadn't even known he was missing until she came into his life. But even as the days grew longer, and their bond stronger, there was a part of him that wondered, would they ever be able to build the life they dreamed of? The idea of becoming parents, of building a family, it seemed so far out of reach. Yet, Adam pushed those thoughts aside, believing in the hope they both shared. He didn't know it then, but the journey ahead would test every part of their lives in ways they couldn't possibly anticipate. By the time Sophia and Adam Martin celebrated their first anniversary, the excitement of their whirlwind romance had settled into the comfortable rhythm of married life. They'd bought a small house on the edge of Ashton, a cozy place with a front porch and a garden that had started to show the first signs of their hard work. They spent weekends together renovating the old home, turning it into a sanctuary for their growing love. Their future felt bright, but there was one thing missing, a baby. Sophia had always imagined herself as a mother. As a child, she had spent hours playing with dolls, pretending to care for little ones, imagining the day when she would hold her own child in her arms. She couldn't wait to be a mother, to build a family with Adam. Adam, too, shared her vision. He imagined running around the yard with their kids, teaching them to ride bikes, and sharing those small moments that make life worthwhile. But as the months passed, their dream of parenthood began to feel increasingly distant. At first, it wasn't so obvious. It was easy to brush off the missed cycles and the occasional feeling of disappointment. They told themselves that some things take time, that it wasn't unusual for couples to take a while to conceive. But as a year slipped by, the reality of their situation set in, and the tension started to mount. In the quiet moments of their evenings together, Sophia would watch Adam with a tight smile, her heart sinking as she saw the sadness in his eyes, a sadness she shared but never dared speak of. And Adam, for his part, tried to remain strong for her, burying his own doubts beneath his typically composed demeanor. But as the weeks turned into months, it became harder to deny the truth. Their dream was slipping further from their reach. After 2 years of trying, they made their first appointment with a fertility specialist. The office was sterile and clinical, an unfamiliar environment that only seemed to make Sophia's anxiety worse. The white walls, the sharp smell of antiseptic, the impersonal chatter of the receptionist, it was all so distant from the warmth they had imagined when thinking about starting a family. The doctor was kind, but the news was anything but. After a series of tests, they learned that the problems they faced were more complicated than they'd ever thought. Adam's sperm count was lower than normal, and Sophia had hormonal imbalances that made it even harder for her to conceive naturally. The doctor laid out their options: IVF, egg donors, or adoption. Each word felt like a heavy weight pressing down on Sophia's chest. It was hard to hear, harder still to accept. They had imagined it would just happen, that they would simply fall into the rhythm of parenthood the way others seemed to. But here they were, staring at the harsh reality of infertility. "We'll do whatever it takes," Adam said, his voice steady, though his hand trembled slightly in hers. His eyes met hers with a sense of resolve, though they both knew this wasn't a fight they had expected to face. For months, they threw themselves into IVF treatments. It became their life: appointments, injections, hormone treatments, tests. The process was grueling. There were moments of hope, fleeting and fragile, when they thought maybe this time would be different. But those moments were often followed by crushing disappointments when the tests came back negative. Each cycle, each failed attempt, chipped away at their optimism. Sophia found herself obsessing over every detail, the timing of her cycles, the medication schedule, the subtle changes in her body. She tracked everything, convinced that one more try would be the one that worked. She couldn't escape the constant worry that she was somehow failing, that her body wasn't doing what it was supposed to. The once joyful woman who dreamed of being a mother was now consumed by stress, exhaustion, and despair. Adam tried to be strong, but the strain of watching Sophia struggle took its toll. He buried himself in his work, staying late at the office, telling himself it was to prepare for the future they were desperately trying to build. But in truth, he was running from the pain of watching his wife suffer. Their conversations became less frequent, the silence between them growing heavier. The weight of their shared disappointment pulled them further apart. The once easy conversations about their dreams and future became replaced by awkward exchanges and unspoken words. "Maybe we should take a break from all this," Adam suggested one night, sitting beside Sophia on their worn couch. His voice was soft, but it was clear that the toll was getting to him. "We can't keep going like this. It's too much, Sophia." Sophia looked at him, a tiredness in her eyes that mirrored his own. "But what if we stop now, and we could have been parents? What if this is the one chance we get?" Adam sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I'm not saying we stop. I'm saying we need to take a breath. For us. For our marriage." Sophia turned away, biting her lip to keep from crying. It was hard to admit, but she knew he was right. The constant cycle of disappointment was tearing them both apart. She had become so focused on the goal of having a child that she had lost sight of the love that had brought them together in the first place. That night, after their conversation, Sophia lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought of the future, the children they dreamed of, the house full of laughter, the love they would share as parents. But for the first time, she wondered if that future was slipping through their fingers. She felt a deep sadness settle in her chest, as if the weight of her unfulfilled dreams was starting to crush her. Adam's steady breathing beside her was a reminder that they were in this together, but the distance between them felt like an ocean. The months dragged on. With each passing day, Sophia and Adam grew more tired, more disillusioned. The strain of IVF, the constant cycle of hope and disappointment, seemed endless. But through it all, they held on to one thing, each other. They clung to their love, hoping that, in the end, it would be enough to bring them the family they so desperately wanted. And yet, they both knew something was changing between them. The road ahead was uncertain, and they weren't sure they could keep walking it without losing more of themselves along the way. It had been a year since Sophia and Adam started their IVF treatments. Their life, once filled with hope and excitement, had become consumed by a relentless routine of doctor's appointments, hormone injections, and endless testing. The bright future they had imagined seemed farther away than ever. Each failure cut deeper than the last, and their home, once filled with laughter and plans for the future, had grown heavy with unspoken words. They were drifting, both physically and emotionally, as the weight of infertility threatened to tear them apart. Then, in the summer of 2019, something unexpected happened. Olivia Carter returned to Ashton. Olivia had been Sophia's best friend since college. They had shared late-night study sessions, heart-to-heart conversations about everything from life's big questions to their hopes and dreams. While Sophia had taken the steady path of teaching, Olivia had embraced a more unconventional life. An artist at heart, Olivia had spent the past few years traveling the world, seeking inspiration from distant places, the bustling streets of Tokyo, the serene temples of Thailand, the rugged beauty of New Zealand. Her return to Ashton was as sudden as it was welcome. She brought with her stories of far-off places, a suitcase full of vibrant paintings, and a sense of freedom that felt like a breath of fresh air. Sophia and Olivia met for coffee one sunny afternoon at their favorite cafe. The moment they saw each other, it was like no time had passed. They hugged tightly, laughing and chatting as if they had never been apart. It was a stark contrast to the heaviness that had settled into Sophia's life. Olivia's bright energy and enthusiasm for life were like a spark in the darkness. She had always been the one to lift Sophia's spirits, to remind her of the joy and beauty that existed beyond their struggles. This time was no different. "So, how have you been?" Olivia asked, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Sophia with concern. It didn't take long for Olivia to sense that something was off. Sophia smiled weakly, sipping her coffee. "I'm fine." "Really?" But the lie hung between them, like an unspoken truth that neither of them wanted to face. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "You're not fine, are you?" Sophia hesitated, feeling the familiar pang of guilt. She had always been able to talk to Olivia, but this was different. It wasn't just about her, it was about Adam too. It was about their broken dreams and the loneliness they had both felt, despite being surrounded by love. "I don't know, Olivia. It's been hard," Sophia admitted. "We've been trying for a baby for 2 years now, and nothing's working. We're doing IVF, and it's just exhausting." Olivia's expression softened. She reached across the table and took Sophia's hand. "I'm sorry, sophomore. I didn't know it was this tough." Sophia let out a shaky breath. "I didn't want to burden you with it. Adam and I we're not in a good place. The treatments are draining us, and I feel like I'm losing him. Like he's slipping away from me." Olivia squeezed her hand. "You're not alone in this, you know. You've got me." Sophia's eyes welled up with tears. She felt so much weight pressing down on her chest, and hearing those words, hearing that Olivia still cared, that she was still there, made the dam inside her burst. She broke down, crying quietly, as Olivia sat beside her, offering a comforting presence. It felt like a release, as if Sophia had been holding her breath for far too long. After a few minutes, Olivia spoke softly. "I know you've been thinking about options. IVF, adoption, have you ever considered egg donation?" Sophia looked up, surprised by the question. "Egg donation," she echoed, her voice shaky. She had heard of it before, but the idea seemed so foreign, so disconnected from her own life. "Yeah," Olivia said, her voice gentle but firm. "I've been thinking about it. I've heard about women donating eggs to help others who can't conceive. It's not something I've ever considered seriously before, but I don't know, maybe I could help." Sophia blinked, trying to process what Olivia was saying. "Wait, you want to donate your eggs to us?" she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Olivia, I do," Olivia interrupted softly. "I know you've been struggling, and I want to help. I'm not saying it's easy, but I've always admired your maternal instincts, Sophia. You're going to be an amazing mother, and if this is something that can help you and Adam, then I want to be part of it. I know it sounds crazy, but I've thought about it a lot, and I think it's the right thing." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the gravity of the decision. Sophia felt a swirl of emotions, confusion, gratitude, and something else she couldn't quite name. Olivia had always been there for her, but this? This was something she couldn't have anticipated. "I don't even know what to say," Sophia murmured, overwhelmed. "This is so much. I mean, you're offering to give us something so personal. It's huge." Olivia smiled warmly, her eyes filled with sincerity. "I know. And I know it's not something you can decide right away. Take your time. Think about it. But just know that I'm here, and I want to help." Sophia sat there in silence, her mind spinning. She could feel the weight of the offer, but at the same time, there was a strange sense of hope flickering inside her. Olivia had always been the free spirit, the one who didn't follow the traditional path, and yet here she was, offering a piece of herself in a way that seemed almost sacrificial. She had been through so much already, and this? This was a kindness that Sophia couldn't even begin to fully comprehend. "I need to talk to Adam," Sophia said finally, her voice low. "I don't know if he'll be ready for this, but I'll talk to him. I'll think about it." Olivia nodded, her smile soft. "Take all the time you need. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, whatever you decide." As they continued to talk, the hours slipped by unnoticed. But for the first time in a long time, Sophia felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the turning point in their struggle. Maybe, with Olivia's unexpected offer, the dream of becoming a mother wasn't as far out of reach as it had seemed. In the weeks that followed Olivia's offer, Sophia and Adam Martin found themselves in a whirlwind of decisions. The thought of accepting Olivia's generous offer to donate her eggs was both overwhelming and deeply moving. For the first time in a long while, they both felt a flicker of hope. But it was also terrifying. The idea of involving a third party in such an intimate and personal process raised countless questions. Would this change their relationship with Olivia? Would it bring them closer, or drive them apart? Sophia and Adam spent countless hours discussing it, weighing the pros and cons. After many long nights of uncertainty, they made the decision to go forward with IVF using Olivia's eggs. The moment they finally agreed felt like a weight had been lifted from their shoulders, but they were also acutely aware that this was just the beginning of a journey that would test them in ways they couldn't predict. The process began with a trip to the fertility clinic, where they met with Dr. Patel, a warm and knowledgeable specialist who would guide them through the egg donation and IVF procedures. Olivia had already undergone some preliminary testing, and everything seemed to be in order. She was in good health, and her eggs were viable, a blessing, considering the gravity of the situation. Still, the process ahead was filled with both hope and trepidation. The first step in the egg donation process was Olivia's hormone treatment. The clinic prescribed a series of medications designed to stimulate her ovaries to produce multiple eggs, a crucial part of the IVF process. Olivia had always been a trooper, but even she began to feel the effects of the hormones. Her mood fluctuated, and her body responded in ways she hadn't anticipated. Bloating, discomfort, and the emotional ups and downs of the drugs made her second-guess her decision at times. But through it all, Olivia remained steadfast, determined to give Sophia and Adam the gift of a family. For Sophia, the months that followed were filled with anxious anticipation. She felt a deep gratitude for Olivia's selflessness, but at the same time, her own doubts began to surface. What if it didn't work? What if Olivia's eggs weren't viable after all? What if something went wrong? Her mind raced with the what-ifs, but she tried to stay focused on the positive. As Olivia prepared for the egg retrieval, Adam found himself emotionally exhausted from the stress. He had always been the calm one, the rational one, but this journey had chipped away at his calm exterior. He was beginning to realize that all the work, all the effort, wouldn't guarantee success, and that realization weighed on him more than he cared to admit. He spent late nights at the office, attempting to distract himself, but even his work didn't provide the solace he had hoped for. The fear of failure was gnawing at him. Finally, after weeks of injections and monitoring, the day of the egg retrieval arrived. It was a crisp, cool morning in Ashton, and Sophia sat in the waiting room of the fertility clinic, her stomach tight with nerves. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and palpable, as Adam sat beside her, squeezing her hand. They tried to exchange reassuring smiles, but both of them knew that the outcome of this procedure was critical. When Olivia emerged from the procedure room a few hours later, her face was pale, but she was smiling, albeit weakly. The procedure had been a success, they had retrieved several viable eggs. Sophia and Adam were elated, but at the same time, a wave of guilt washed over them. They had asked so much of Olivia, and despite her willingness, she had been through so much for them. They could see the strain in her eyes, and for a brief moment, Sophia wondered if this was all worth it. But Olivia waved away her concerns. "I'm fine," Olivia said, her voice faint but reassuring. "We did it." The next phase of the IVF process began almost immediately. Adam and Sophia's sperm were introduced to the eggs, and they awaited the result, fertilization. The clinic called them a few days later with the news: several of the embryos had successfully fertilized, and the next step would be the embryo transfer. The waiting period was excruciating. Sophia found herself fixated on every little detail, the way she felt physically, the slightest changes in her body. She had learned to read her body like a map, hoping against hope that each twinge or shift was a sign that the pregnancy had taken. But nothing was certain, and the fear of disappointment loomed large. On the day of the embryo transfer, Adam and Sophia sat in the sterile exam room, their hearts pounding in their chests. They were surrounded by the hum of machines, the quiet voices of nurses, and the steady beeping of equipment. But all of that noise felt distant. All that mattered was the tiny embryo that would hopefully take root in Sophia's womb. The procedure itself was quick, but the emotional weight was heavy. The doctor carefully inserted the embryos, and Sophia held her breath, wondering if this would be the moment that changed everything. She could feel Adam's hand on hers, warm and steady. His presence, though quiet, reassured her. After the procedure, Sophia was instructed to take it easy. No heavy lifting, no stress, just a quiet few days at home to allow the embryos to settle. But as the days dragged on, the uncertainty grew. Every time she went to the bathroom, she feared the worst. Every cramp, every sensation, was magnified 100-fold. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the day arrived for the pregnancy test. Sophia stood in the bathroom, staring at the little plastic stick in her hand, the faintest sense of disbelief clouding her mind. She turned the stick over slowly, and there it was, 2 pink lines. Positive. For a moment, everything stood still. Sophia's heart raced as she fought back tears, her breath catching in her throat. She felt dizzy, overwhelmed, and completely unable to process what she was seeing. It wasn't just a test result, it was a dream realized. She burst into the living room, holding the test aloft like a trophy, her voice shaky as she whispered the words, "Adam, we're pregnant." Adam's face lit up, a wide smile spreading across his face as he pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground. They laughed and cried, holding each other tight, the joy of that moment overwhelming them both. The years of struggle, the pain, the doubt, it all melted away in that instant. But even as they celebrated, deep down, both Sophia and Adam knew that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, they felt that their dream of becoming parents was finally within reach. As they called Olivia to share the news, her voice crackled with excitement over the phone. "I knew it," she said, her words a soft, joyful cry. "I knew you could do it." In that moment, Sophia realized that while the road ahead might be uncertain, they were no longer walking it alone. For Sophia Martin and Adam Martin, the joy of seeing 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test was more than just a moment of happiness, it was the culmination of years of struggle, disappointment, and heartache. The news that Sophia was finally pregnant felt like a dream realized. They celebrated with laughter, hugs, and tears, sharing the good news with friends and family. For a brief moment, everything seemed perfect. But what no one anticipated was how the dynamics between the 3 of them, Sophia, Adam, and Olivia Carter, would begin to shift in subtle and unexpected ways. In the weeks following the pregnancy confirmation, the initial wave of excitement and relief began to give way to a new kind of tension. Sophia was glowing with the joy of impending motherhood, but at the same time, the lingering exhaustion from years of IVF treatments made her more vulnerable. Her emotions were on a roller coaster ride. 1 minute, she was daydreaming about baby names and nursery colors, the next, she was overwhelmed by the weight of her worries. Could she really be the kind of mother she dreamed of being? Would she be able to handle the responsibility? And through all of this, Olivia remained a steady presence in their lives. She had been the one who had made all of this possible, the one who had offered her eggs so selflessly, the one who had supported Sophia through every emotional and physical challenge. Olivia had stayed involved in their lives, bringing them books on pregnancy, offering advice, and constantly reassuring Sophia that everything would be fine. But as much as Sophia appreciated her friend's support, something was starting to shift, and it wasn't just her own emotions. Adam, too, had been struggling. He was happy, no doubt, but there was a subtle unease that began to cloud his thoughts. As Sophia's pregnancy progressed, he noticed something about the way Olivia looked at him, something in her lingering glances, the small touches on his arm when she spoke to him, the way her eyes seemed to light up whenever he entered the room. It was small, almost imperceptible, but Adam couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more between them than just friendship. The little moments began to add up. Olivia would send Adam texts about the pregnancy, innocent enough, but there was always something in the tone, a familiarity that was too intimate for comfort. He found himself second-guessing his interactions with Olivia, wondering if the closeness between them was more than just the friendship they had once shared. He tried to brush it off, tried to tell himself it was just his mind playing tricks on him, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Sophia noticed it too, though she didn't want to admit it. She had been so caught up in the excitement of her pregnancy, but the more Olivia was around, the more she began to scrutinize her every interaction with Adam. She noticed the way Olivia would smile at him, the way they would laugh together over little inside jokes, the way their conversations would linger a little too long. And it wasn't just Olivia. Sophia found herself feeling a strange, unsettling jealousy whenever Adam complimented Olivia or praised her for her selflessness. It started small, a fleeting thought here, a moment of doubt there. But as the weeks wore on, Sophia's suspicions grew. What if Olivia and Adam were becoming too close? What if the connection they had once shared as friends was starting to cross boundaries? Sophia tried to rationalize it. Olivia had given them this incredible gift, she was their savior. But the more she thought about it, the more the question lingered, had Olivia's feelings for Adam shifted? The emotional strain of pregnancy, combined with the complex dynamics of their friendship and the years of infertility, had begun to unravel Sophia in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her once open and trusting nature had been replaced with a gnawing paranoia, a fear that something was being kept from her. She found herself looking for signs, reading too much into every interaction between Adam and Olivia, searching for clues that could confirm her growing suspicion. One evening, as the three of them sat in the living room, the tension in the air was palpable. Sophia tried to focus on the conversation, but her mind kept drifting. She watched as Olivia laughed at something Adam said, her head tilted back, her hand resting lightly on his arm. It was an innocent enough moment, or at least, it should have been. But to Sophia, it felt loaded with unspoken meaning. Her stomach churned. Later that night, as Sophia and Adam lay in bed, she couldn't hold it in anymore. Do you think Olivia is starting to, like you? Sophia asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if she were afraid to hear the answer. Adam froze, his body stiffening as he processed her words. He turned to face her, his brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? Of course not. Sophia sat up, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around her knees. I don't know, Adam. Something feels off. The way she looks at you, the way she talks to you. I can't explain it, but it's like there's something there. Something more than just friendship. Adam sighed, his voice filled with frustration and confusion. Sophia, you're being paranoid. Olivia is your best friend. She's here to support us. That's all. But Sophia could see the uncertainty in his eyes, the brief flash of hesitation before he responded. He hadn't outright denied it, and that, in her mind, was all the confirmation she needed. Sophia pulled the covers tightly around her, trying to stifle the wave of jealousy and hurt that threatened to consume her. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension that neither Sophia nor Adam wanted to confront. Every look Olivia gave Adam, every touch, every word felt loaded with meaning. Sophia became withdrawn, no longer able to separate her love for her husband from the fear that was taking root in her heart. She couldn't tell if her feelings were a product of the pregnancy hormones, or if there was something more sinister at play. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized she couldn't shake the feeling that Olivia was too involved in their lives, in their marriage. At night, Sophia would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was the beginning of the end. Would the gift that Olivia had given them become the thing that tore their world apart? Would the dream of becoming a mother, the dream that they had fought for so long, come at the cost of everything they had built together? The truth was, Sophia didn't know what to believe anymore. All she knew was that something was changing, something deep and unsettling, and she couldn't ignore it. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface for months finally reached its breaking point one fateful evening in October 2020. The air in the Martin household had become thick with unspoken fears, growing resentment, and jealousy. For Sophia, the pregnancy that should have been a source of joy had become a catalyst for emotional chaos. And at the heart of it all was the growing suspicion, and dread, that her husband, Adam, and her best friend, Olivia, were becoming too close. Too comfortable. Too intimate. For weeks, Sophia had battled with her feelings of paranoia, trying to brush off the nagging thoughts that gnawed at her. She had tried to convince herself that it was all in her head, that she was just overthinking, driven by the hormones and exhaustion of pregnancy. But the more she watched them, the more certain she became that something was happening between them. Every touch, every laugh shared between Adam and Olivia, every time she caught them in a moment of quiet intimacy, it all fueled her fears. And as much as Adam tried to reassure her that there was nothing between him and Olivia, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that he was lying. His actions spoke louder than his words. He was distant, distracted. He seemed to spend more time with Olivia, talking to her about things he used to talk to Sophia about. The jealousy that simmered inside her turned into a searing, uncontrollable rage. That night, Adam had been working late again, something he had been doing more frequently. He had promised Sophia that he would be home for dinner, but as the hours ticked by and the clock on the wall crept closer to 9 p.m., Sophia felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She couldn't help but wonder, where was he? What was he really doing? When he finally came home, the moment his key turned in the lock, Sophia felt her heart race. She stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at the doorway as his footsteps echoed down the hallway. When he entered the room, his face was drawn, tired, the weariness in his eyes unmistakable. He set his briefcase down with a soft thud and hung his coat on the hook by the door. "Sophia," he began, his voice low but firm. "We need to talk. I can't keep doing this anymore. The tension, it's unbearable. I'm not the same person I was when we started this journey, and neither are you. We need help." Sophia's breath hitched as his words hit her like a slap in the face. She hadn't been expecting him to say this. In her mind, this was supposed to be a moment of reassurance, of peace, but instead, it felt like an accusation. An admission of guilt. "Talk about what?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling as the flood of emotions she had been bottling up for so long threatened to explode. "What exactly do you want to talk about, Adam?" He sighed, walking towards her with his hands raised, trying to be calm, trying to be patient. "Sophia, we're not okay. You've been distant. I've been distant. And Olivia, she's been there for you. We need to acknowledge that. We need to fix what's broken." Sophia's chest tightened, her pulse racing as her mind tried to process what he was saying. "Olivia," she whispered, her voice thick with bitterness. "She's been there for me, hasn't she? Is that what you're trying to say? She's the one you've been turning to, isn't she?" Adam looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Sophia saw it in that moment, the flicker of guilt, the hesitation in his expression. It was all she needed to confirm her worst fears. "You and Olivia, you've been too close, haven't you?" Her voice cracked as she spoke the words, but the anger that rose within her drowned out the pain. "I saw it. The way she looks at you, the way you both talk. The way you laugh together. There's something between you two, Adam. Don't lie to me." Adam's eyes widened as he took a step back, his hands falling to his sides in frustration. "Sophia, please. You're overreacting. There's nothing happening between us. Olivia is your best friend, I'm just trying to help. You've been so stressed with the pregnancy, and I. Don't lie to me." Sophia snapped, the words coming out in a harsh, guttural shout. Her breathing was shallow, erratic, and her pulse thundered in her ears as the jealousy consumed her. The years of emotional strain, the fear of losing her husband, the pain of infertility, and the betrayal she believed was happening, it all built up in an instant, pushing her to the brink of madness. Without thinking, she grabbed the nearest object on the counter, a heavy crystal vase, one that had been a wedding gift from her grandmother. She swung it at Adam in a blind, chaotic rage, her arms shaking violently. The vase shattered on the wall behind him, the sound of glass breaking like a gunshot in the tense silence of the room. Adam froze, his eyes wide with shock as he staggered backward, narrowly avoiding the flying shards. He raised his hands, trying to calm her down. "Sophia, stop. You need to calm down. This isn't you." But Sophia couldn't hear him. The overwhelming rush of emotion, the betrayal she felt, the fear of losing everything, drowned out everything else. She charged at him, her hands outstretched, clawing at his chest. She didn't care anymore. She didn't care about the baby, about their future. All that mattered was the overwhelming need to stop the pain, to stop the fear, to force him to feel what she was feeling. The two of them stumbled across the kitchen, knocking over chairs as they struggled. Adam tried to restrain her without hurting her, but Sophia was relentless. In her mind, this wasn't just a fight. This was a battle for control, for the truth, for her very sanity. In the midst of the struggle, Sophia lost her footing on the slick tile floor, crashing into Adam. He stumbled backward, and in a split second, he lost his balance. His head struck the sharp corner of the granite countertop with a sickening crack, and he crumpled to the floor, motionless. For a moment, everything stopped. Sophia stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest, her body trembling with shock. She stared at Adam, her husband, lying on the floor in a pool of his own blood. His eyes were open, but his body was limp. The gravity of what she had just done slowly began to sink in. The reality of the situation hit her like a wave, a crushing, suffocating weight. Sophia dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she reached for her phone to call 911. But in that instant, another thought seized her mind: they'll take my baby. Her eyes widened with fear, and her hand trembled as it hovered over the phone. She couldn't call for help. If she did, they would know what had happened. They would see that she was losing her mind, and they would take the baby away. She couldn't let that happen. So, instead of dialing for help, Sophia stood up, her mind racing. She started cleaning. She mopped the blood from the floor, disposed of the broken vase, and dragged Adam's lifeless body to the garage. The clock was ticking, but Sophia was no longer the woman she had been before. She was someone else now, a woman desperate to protect what little she had left. By the time dawn broke, Sophia had covered her tracks. Adam was gone, and all that was left was a story she would tell. A story of a husband who had left her, a husband who had abandoned her and their unborn child. But deep down, she knew the truth. And as she dialed 911 to report Adam's disappearance, the weight of her actions began to settle over her like a suffocating fog. Sophia had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And now, there was no going back. The following days were a blur of confusion, dread, and denial for Sophia Martin. The weight of her actions hung heavily over her, yet she couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that what she had done was necessary, almost inevitable. Adam was gone, her husband, the man she had once shared so many dreams with, was now just another part of a tragic story she could no longer control. When Sophia called 911, her voice was shaky, but she managed to paint the picture she needed to. Adam had stormed out after a heated argument, and she was afraid something terrible had happened to him. She described the fight, the fear in his eyes when he left, and the fact that she had been so overwhelmed with emotion that she hadn't been able to stop him. The police arrived, and with them, the cold reality that she had to stay in character. The house felt eerily silent as Sophia answered their questions, trying to appear like a concerned wife who had lost her husband without knowing why. Her mind, however, raced as she carefully calculated her every word. She couldn't afford to slip up. The officers spoke to the neighbors, gathering testimonies about the argument they had heard between Sophia and Adam. Some mentioned hearing raised voices, the sound of something breaking, but no one had seen Adam leave. That, too, played into Sophia's carefully crafted narrative. As the search for Adam went on, Sophia found herself caught in a web of lies, desperately trying to keep the facade intact. She was visited by detectives who asked probing questions about the night he disappeared, about her relationship with Olivia, questions that made Sophia feel uncomfortable, though she did her best to hide it. The truth, however, had a way of revealing itself, like the slow unraveling of a tightly wound thread. Forensic teams began combing through the house, and they found traces of blood in places Sophia thought she had cleaned thoroughly. Luminol revealed the faint traces of violence that couldn't be scrubbed away. But it wasn't just the blood that led them closer to the truth. A neighbor's teenager, fascinated by the new drone he had received as a gift, had been flying it around his backyard when he noticed something strange in the Martins' driveway late at night. The footage, though grainy and distant, clearly showed Sophia struggling to load a large, heavy object into Adam's car. The sight of her dragging his body into the trunk was chilling. The investigation quickly shifted direction as the evidence mounted against Sophia. With the drone footage, the blood traces, and the conflicting statements from the neighbors, the detectives finally had enough to bring Sophia in for questioning. It was at the police station that Sophia's carefully constructed story began to crumble. Detective Laura Jacobs, a seasoned investigator with an intuitive sense for deceit, led the interrogation. She started by laying out the evidence, the inconsistencies in Sophia's story, the testimony about the fight, the footage from the drone. For a while, Sophia stuck to her narrative. She clung to the story of Adam storming off, of how she was left alone, not knowing where he went. But as the pressure mounted, and the walls seemed to close in, the cracks in her composure began to show. She started to fidget in her seat, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. Finally, Detective Jacobs spoke softly, yet firmly. "Sophia, you don't have to keep lying. The evidence is clear. We know what happened that night." It was then that Sophia's wall broke. The tears came first, heavy, choking sobs that filled the room. She could no longer pretend. "I didn't mean to hurt him," she whispered between sobs. I thought he was going to leave me. I couldn't lose him, not like that. I couldn't let him go, not after everything we've been through." As the confession tumbled from her lips, the weight of the past months seemed to lift, but the aftermath was far from over. Sophia admitted to striking Adam, to the accidental blow that led to his death. Her mind, clouded by jealousy, fear, and years of emotional strain, had pushed her to commit an act that would change her life forever. When Sophia was arrested, it wasn't just her freedom that was taken away, it was her entire future. The child she was carrying, the dream of motherhood that had once seemed so close, now hung in the balance. She had made a choice in the heat of the moment, a choice that cost her everything. The trial that followed was one of public scrutiny. Many saw Sophia as a victim of her circumstances, a woman pushed to the edge by years of infertility, betrayal, and a crumbling relationship. But others, including Olivia, saw it as a tragic end to a friendship that had once been rooted in love, but had now been tainted by the consequences of Sophia's actions. As the jury deliberated, Sophia sat at the defense table, her eyes vacant, her body weary. She no longer recognized the woman she had become. The trial lasted 5 days, and when the verdict came in, the courtroom fell silent. Sophia Martin was found guilty of second-degree murder, her actions driven by the breakdown of her mental state, but without premeditation. In the sentencing, the judge took into account the unusual circumstances surrounding Sophia's actions, as well as her emotional instability during the pregnancy. She was sentenced to 18 years in prison, a sentence that would keep her separated from the life she had once dreamed of. As she was led away in handcuffs, Sophia glanced back at Olivia, who sat in the gallery, tears in her eyes. There was no joy in her expression, only sorrow. Outside the courthouse, the news of Sophia's conviction sent shockwaves through Ashton, leaving the town to grapple with the tragedy that had unfolded in their midst. A life had been lost, another had been destroyed, and a friendship, once unbreakable, had been shattered. As we reflect on Sophia Martin's tragic story, we are left with the haunting question: how far would you go to protect the ones you love? Sophia's actions were born out of fear, jealousy, and desperation, but at what cost? Her story is a stark reminder of the fragile nature of human emotions, the devastating consequences of unchecked paranoia, and the far-reaching impact of one impulsive decision. What do you think about Sophia's actions? Could this tragedy have been avoided? Do you think her mental state played a significant role in her crime, or was it something more? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories that explore the complexities of the human heart and mind. Your thoughts matter to us.